Hi, everybody. Well, we've made it to draft week. It's time to get ready for the Saints to be on the board towards the end of the first round for this first draft post-Drew Brees era. And for that, of course, we have to be joined by our Saints insider, Mike Nabors. Hi, everyone. I'm Victor Howell. Glad you're joining us here as we get ready for the draft this week. And, Mike, let's start right there because you've talked to Drew after each and every game, you know, for his career here in New Orleans. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the importance of this draft, being that it is the first one post-Brees era, because as you know, there's always been that comfort level knowing that whatever you get on offense, Drew's going to be there to put things together. Now he's not. So there's certainly a question mark as to whether it'll be Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston. Could there be a wild card in the play? So for the franchise, how important is this 21 draft?
Well, Vic, you have 8 picks, and that's always good. You know, Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis aren't scared of moving up in the draft. That's what has made the draft fun, covering the New Orleans Saints. But 15 years. I mean, how many franchises can say that? They've had the same quarterback for 15 years. It's weird having a draft and not thinking about Drew Brees. But the ironic thing, we'll get into it, it's all about defense in this draft. I mean, the Saints are really a good football team still without Drew Brees. They have a lot of talent on offense. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position. But in terms of getting the offense ready, I think it's going to be different because you know, Jameis Winston can throw the ball down the field better, and so can Taysom Hill, and they can do things Drew Brees couldn't do. So I think wide receiver will be a position they're looking at, but I think defense is really the premium for these picks, especially early.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's been articles recently out of New Orleans that Taysom Hill has been focusing nothing but on quarterback. And, of course, we know Jameis Winston and his emphasis on wanting to get in the game and what we've seen these guys in their roles. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop there. But you're right. I think because of some of the offseason moves that have been made, and Sean Payton this past week made it clear that there's one position in the defensive backfield that they have to address. He didn't say they were necessarily going to address it right away in the draft, but he made it clear that by the time we kick off this upcoming season, defensive backfield corners specifically is going to be an area of concern that the Saints need to address.
Well, look at the history of Sean Payton. I mean, when Sean Payton's been a winner, they've been balanced on offense. They can throw the ball, they can run the ball, and they've had good cornerback play. I mean, their heyday when they won the Super Bowl, the years after that, they had Tracy Porter on one side. They had Jabari Greer. Then, of course, they had the losing seasons. They suffered at the cornerback position. We'd like to forget Brandon Browner earlier on. We'd like to forget Jason David. But since they drafted Marshawn Lattimore, they picked up Janoris Jenkins. Again, you see success with the Saints and with defense. But, you know, when I look at the draft this year, Vic, it's the make me feel old draft. You got Joe Horn's son. You got Patrick Surtain's son. You got Asante Samuel's son. I mean, J.C. Horn is probably going to be gone by the time the Saints pick. He may be the first cornerback taken, but when Joe Horn had his cell phone celebration, he was calling J.C. Horn because he was a little kid and upset he couldn't go to the game with his dad, trying to appease J.C. Horn. So it makes you feel old in a lot of ways when you see the players of guys you covered or sons of guys you covered make it to the league a little bit. So I think no doubt corner is a premium position. Sean Payton knows how important that is. But I think at 28, they have a chance to have some guys. I mean, a guy bandied around is Greg Newsome from Northwestern, but I see a guy, Caleb Farley. He was the number 1 rated cornerback before everything was kind of scaled down and really before he had back surgery. So he could slip in the first round. So look for potentially Caleb Farley to slip to the Saints, but they really like Greg Newsome. If both of those guys are gone, they may reach for an Asante Samuel or Eric Stokes from Georgia, but we've seen it time and time again. They've had needs over and over with Sean Payton, but they haven't always drafted those needs. I mean, we saw it a year ago with Cesar Ruiz in the first round. So Sean Payton keeps you guessing not only who's he going to pick, but if he's going to move up and get his guy too.
And this has been the name that you've heard from most people at 28. Asante Samuel on some of the mock drafts actually have the Saints getting him in the second round. I don't know if they'd move up that high to take him in the first round if some of those names you've mentioned would be gone. But Newsome certainly has been the name that most people have focused on when it comes to the Saints. Interestingly, a lot of these mocks, Mike, have 5 quarterbacks going in the top 9 or 10 picks, half of the top 10 picks at the quarterback position. And some of these mocks have 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks, quarterbacks across the board. And then ironically, or interestingly rather, 3 of the next picks, all wide receivers, 1 from LSU and 2 from Alabama. So really offensive loaded at the top. But then, as you mentioned, really for the Saints, a lot of the focus would be on the defensive side. Let me ask you this too. Because of your experience and where you've lived in the state of Florida and with Tampa Bay making a run, not winning the South last year, but going home and winning the Super Bowl, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the reports I've heard is lately they're bringing everybody back from the Super Bowl championship team for another run next year. So if you're the Saints, having won so impressively in Tampa in the regular season on that Monday night game, only to then lose so disappointingly in the postseason, do you have to work this draft for the Saints? Any keeping kind of in your peripheral what Tampa Bay is doing and what they're bringing back since you saw what they were able to do in the postseason?
Keep up with the Brady's, I guess what you're saying, in Tampa Bay.
That's right.
Here's the good news for Saints fans. Tom Brady's going to be a year older. Gronkowski is going to be a year older, But the bad news is, Devin White and that defense, they're coming into their own. So the Bucs could be better with the 22 guys back. I mean, it's an older roster, but they have some up-and-comers. I think the Saints, to me, Vic, though, you mentioned this is the key in this draft. If all the quarterbacks are taken and all the wide receivers are taken early in this draft, that's great for the Saints because that gives them more room to potentially move up and get one of those cornerbacks we've talked about. Or how about a linebacker like Penn State's Micah Parsons, the best linebacker in the draft? Think about this. Our buddy Scott Shanley will love us talking about linebackers here. But the Saints really haven't had two good linebackers on the same field since they had Demario Davis and Quan Alexander at portions of the 2020 season. I mean, when Quan Alexander went down, Anzalone had his moments, but he was mostly hurt, sometimes ineffective. They need another linebacker. Now, Zach Bond is a guy who has promise, but, Vic, it's tough to get a guy in the second round sometimes in the draft and really believe he's going to be that difference maker. If an opportunity opens, we have a lot of quarterbacks picked, we have a lot of wide receivers picked, maybe they go up and get a Micah Parsons because, boy, they could use an impact linebacker. As much as we talk about corners, I almost think the depth of corners in this draft, if you could get a Micah Parsons, you could maybe get that corner in the second round easier than getting that linebacker.
Well, you know as well as anybody, because of your travels with the Saints each and every game since we've started this journey, Mickey Loomis and company, they know how to make some magic on the backside of the draft. They'll go get somebody that's got talent that every other team in the league is going to bypass or just think they don't fit in the system. And next thing you know, they're blossoming in this New Orleans system, whether it's offense or defense. And with the draft expected to be so heavily loaded with offense, you bring up a great point that the Saints can make some moves. But let me ask you this. Do you think with the Saints draft, they've got 28 at number 1, and then they've got 1 in the second. They've got a couple of compensatory picks, too, in the third round. Do you see would you expect the Saints to take those picks, maybe bundle them and move up? We just saw the Ravens, make a big move with the Chiefs where they loaded up some picks with one big talent, but a lot of extra picks. Would you be shocked or surprised if Mickey Loomis, Sean Payton and company tried to pull that trigger and maybe, combine some of these other picks and maybe move up to grab somebody?
2 words. Absolutely not. I would not be surprised. I mean, think about a couple years ago, Vic, who saw the Marcus Davenport deal where they get rid of a first-round pick, and we'll see if that plays out. He's been a decent player, but not a 2 first-round pick type player. Every year they surprise us. I mean, when they didn't have a first-round pick a couple years ago, they get McCoy from A&M, who's been unbelievable. I mean, he may be so good that he's been great at center. They may move him to guard, move Ruiz to center, and make that all work on the offensive line. So I think you give Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton 8 picks. I think at some point they're definitely going to package that. I don't know if it's going to be in the first round. Maybe it's in the second round. But I love the way this draft plays out for the Saints because keep drafting the quarterbacks. Keep going with the wide receivers. More talent falls to them and more opportunity to move up. And there's a lot of cornerback talent in this draft. It's one of the strengths, and that plays well for the Saints. And linebackers kind of hit or miss, but I think if they see their guy, that's been the one thing about the Sean Payton era with Jeff Ireland is they've really gone to their board. I mean, nobody had Alvin Kamara. And I remember when they drafted Ryan Ramczyk, Vic, I was thinking, man, let's make that deal with the Patriots and get Malcolm Butler. They need cornerback help. They draft some guy named Ramczyk because Lattimore fell to him. Thinking, what are they doing?
Right.
Oh, I'm the idiot because Ramczyk may be a future Hall of Famer. So right. They trust their draft board with Jeff Ireland. It's worked out for them. And, they've had great drafts ever since. I think they'll have another good draft. I think they'll be aggressive too.
We'll be able to touch on more of this. We'll make sure we get back together. And unfortunately, Scott couldn't join us this time, but we hope to get Scott back with us post-draft for some reaction. But before we say goodbye, let me ask you this, Mike. We talk about with Jameis and with Taysom Hill, they have told us that they feel like the next quarterback is in the building. And we know there are a lot of big names that are expected to go off the board. Is there any sense or any chance you think the Saints dabble at the quarterback position, or are they locked in with the fact that they feel they've got their guy there with Jameis and or Taysom, and they move on and fill up all the other positions.
Well, like what Sean Payton said recently, we're in the quarterback business. And when he had Drew Brees, if Lattimore hadn't fell to him, Vic, we know he would have gotten Patrick Mahomes. So that's when he had Drew Brees. So if that's going to happen, we know he's still in the quarterback business. So that's what makes this draft really fun. I don't know about our audience. I don't even know about you, my friend. We haven't really talked about this, but I love the draft. I can't get enough of it. So many people are wrong, but that's what makes it so right. It's so much fun to watch and be on your edge of your seat in every pick. So, yeah, I don't know who they're intrigued by. I tell you one guy I'm intrigued by is that Justin Fields. I mean, you heard going into the draft, it's Lawrence Fields. It's Lawrence Fields. Oh, it's definitely Lawrence. And then Fields all of a sudden could be the sixth guy pick in terms of the quarterback position. You wonder if a guy like that, with all his ability, he's accurate. In this day and age of playing quarterback, he has so much talent. If Sean Payton is intrigued by him, could move up. So I think everything is on the board in terms of quarterback, in terms of linebacker, in terms of all these positions of need. We'll see what happens. But with Sean Payton, you never leave any of this out.
Well, and Mike, to your point about the excitement, the draft coverage by the NFL is now expanding to more and more networks, and they've got it back stretched out again where they try to build all the excitement with just the first round and then the next couple rounds, and then you finish it out. But to your point about so many people who can't get enough of it, you're waiting for that first wow moment. Most people think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence going to the Jags. In fact, he's already sent thank you letters because they were sending him wedding gifts or engagement gifts or something in the city of Jacksonville. So he's already telling them thank you. Zach Wilson's a name from BYU who really rocketed up the boards over this last year, though a lot of people didn't get to watch BYU. Jeff Grimes, former coach at LSU, who now has gone to Baylor, was the offensive coordinator there that had Zach Wilson in that system that really built him up. I've seen some mock drafts that have him as high as number 2. There's Justin Fields. Could he go to the Niners? And then there's Trey Lance. Remember, North Dakota State played that one game with all the shifting with football this year with COVID, just to give him some exposure before the draft and give him a chance. Oh, and by the way, there's Mac Jones, some guy at Alabama who won the national championship. So you wonder which one of these quarterbacks is going to either provide the wow moment or they'll be the wow moment because they didn't get picked by somebody you thought who might take them. Then all of a sudden the boards start to shift and change. And I think that's what has everybody so locked in with so much talent near the top. Don't forget all the wide receivers, Terrace Marshall from LSU and the guys from Alabama. And there's so much there at top. You just wonder which one of these guys is going to provide that holy cow moment. They didn't take him and then everything's off the boards.
Well, think about Mac Jones. If he goes 3 to the Niners, Vic, he could be picked higher than Tua was a year ago. A year ago, we're thinking, boy, Tua's gone. How's Alabama going to be with this Mac Jones guy? I mean, you never know year to year. But it's crazy with Jacksonville. I used to work in Jacksonville. They are so gung-ho about Trevor Lawrence. I have buddies that do a Trevor cast. I mean, they haven't been relevant in so long. And to bring it full circle with the Saints, think about that. Your football team hasn't been relevant. You old Saints fans know how that feels.
Right.
If you're born in this century, all you've known is Drew Brees, Sean Payton, playoff picture, Super Bowl contenders, all that stuff. That makes you appreciate the predicament of the Saints. And as much as they're going to miss Drew Brees and his leadership and everything that comes with it, this is still a very good football team. I think they have a lot of upside potentially with these quarterbacks in doing things they haven't been able to do, but they got to get a cornerback because, man, we can say it over and over again in the Sean Payton era. They've had great offenses and they can put points on the board, but if they can't stop anybody, it doesn't matter.
Some early Vegas numbers have the Saints over under 9.5 wins this season. We'll see how it all plays out and how the new development of this 2021-22 team starts out later this week with the draft. Mike, it's always great to talk to you. Look, we'll track down Scott. I know he's been busy where he lives with his kids in school and football, keeping himself busy, but we'll track him down and let's get together again post-draft. We'll evaluate what the Saints did. Maybe we'll get a better feel for what their angles are, and we'll continue counting down to the start of the season.
Absolutely, Vic. Always enjoy it.
Great to have you with us, Mike. It's Mike Nabors. I'm Victor Howell. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the NFL draft this coming week, and we'll get back together afterwards and evaluate how the New Orleans Saints did in this year's NFL draft.